everybody. It is time once again for another Advocacy with Adam with the Alaska Airmen's Association. My name is Adam White, and it is September of 2025. And I've got a long list of things to discuss with you this month, as usual. But first, I want to have a short discussion with you, maybe. Which, first of all, thank you for folks that are interacting in the comment section. I try my best to respond to those. And if not directly through YouTube, get in touch with you directly if I happen to have your contact information already. So I do appreciate that. It does help get the video out to more and more people, which I am constantly running into folks these days that say that they watch these updates and appreciate the content. So thank you for that feedback. It does mean a lot to know that, yeah, folks are paying attention and watching. But I have got a question for you. How do you access charting data? Do you still use paper charts in the airplane? Which, by the way, you know the FAA stopped printing those themselves in 2013 and went to third-party vendors, places like Sporty's and other places, to print on demand those paper charts. Do you still use paper charts? Are they current? Maybe that's a better question. I know people say, well, the mountains don't move. Actually, they do sometimes, but there's been a lot of updated information on the sectional charts and terminal area charts. I almost said WAC charts, but that would date me. I do miss WAC charts, by the way. Those were pretty handy back in the day. Do you use a third-party app like ForeFlight or Garmin Pilot? Or those are the two most common used apps. On an iPad or some other electronic tablet, or even on your phone. Curious to know if you use that, and if you use a larger tablet or your phone for that data and that information. And also, I'm kind of curious to know what kind of subscription level you have with that. Do you have just the basic bare minimums? Do you purchase the IFR charts, even though you may not fly IFR? Do you have a subscription level that geo-references all of those things, which is pretty handy, I'll admit. Do you have a TSO panel mount display in your airplane that has current charting information that would meet the FAA requirement to have that data available to you in the cockpit? Just kind of curious to know what you use for that. Or do you just use a handheld GPS that has some charting information in it, but not all of it? Either a handheld device or even a panel mount device that may or may not be certified for IFR operations. The reason why I'm asking is because, first of all, I'm just curious. One of the things I try to do is to stay ahead of the FAA and the things that may be coming down the road. And with the Anchorage airspace redesign, I've been involved in a lot of meetings talking about charting, talking about the VFR procedures that we have in the Alaska supplement, which, by the way, do you have a hard copy of that? Or do you rely on, again, ForeFlight or Garmin Pilot to access that information? We're looking at updating some of that data as we go through this process, and I'm just curious to know how you access it, because a lot of this information is still being critiqued and evaluated from the perspective of a paper chart. And if most of us have moved beyond paper charts, that would open up some flexibility for like different information to be displayed on different zoom levels of an electronic chart. Or do we still need to have the paper charts and still need to design and maintain the charts from a perspective of it actually being printed on paper, even though, again, the FAA does not print these charts anymore. It goes out to third-party vendors to print on demand, again, at places like Sporty's. So I'm just curious because I'm anticipating this is becoming more and more of an issue as we move forward with technology. And I know in the marine industry, navigational charts in the marine world have gone to purely electronic. Now, you can still get some paper charts, but they're harder and harder to find for the marine industry. And so at what point does the aviation industry follow suit? Or should we even follow suit? I'm really curious to know your response to that. So take a minute in the comments, write down answers to some of those questions. And if you need to go back in the video and remind yourself of what some of those questions were, please do that. I am genuinely curious and really do want to know how you access aeronautical chart information in the cockpit and even pre-flight. Do you have charts and maps on the wall like I have behind me here? Is not an aviation chart. It's not a FAA approved chart, but it is from the U.S. Geological Survey. It's a shaded relief terrain map that obviously I have a lot of other things on the borders, but it is a very handy tool for me for pre-flight planning to know what the terrain might be between one place or another. There's no place names on that map, but I do have another map over here by the coffee stand in the hangar, which, by the way, if you ever stop in Nenana and need a cup of coffee, stop by the hangar. It's pretty easy to make a pot. Over by that area, I do have a better map that shows communities, shows the rivers a little bit better, has everything labeled, and that is a much easier chart to look at. So I am curious to know, what do you do for charting information in all the phases of your aviation activities, from pre-flight all the way into the cockpit? I can tell you what I use. I do use an iPad, and I have my phone as a backup, but I'll also have paper charts in the aircraft. Now, those paper charts are out of date, but they are sufficient for a third level backup to having that information. I also have moving map GPS. One aircraft has a TSO to IFR solution in it. The other airplane is just a handheld that's in a Air Gizmo panel dock. So I do have lots of ways to access that information. Now, for me personally, because of the type of flying that I do, it's been cheaper for me to have the highest level of subscription with ForeFlight than it was when I needed to buy the paper charts for the areas of the state of Alaska that I operate in. So I know that's not necessarily the case for all of us, but for me and for my economics going through that, I made that jump to purely electronic charts several years ago, mainly from an economics perspective, and then the ease of use with a tablet in one airplane, and then the other not being big enough to have a tablet there in the panel, either a yoke mount or anything else. It's just not enough room. So I use my cell phone for that. So curious to know what you use. And again, it's because at some point in time, because of the other projects I'm working on your behalf, charting comes up more and more. And I anticipate that conversation to come up again in the future. And I really would like to have that information in my back pocket so we can engage at that time and not have to put that on hold. So let me know. Moving on to things. Speaking of the Anchorage airspace changes that are being proposed, next week, the 23rd and 24th of September, there will be some informal airspace meetings being held with the FAA. They are virtual only meetings. Now, the benefit to that is that you can be anywhere and still attend. The downside is that you can't be there in person to have those interactions back and forth. So I will put the link in the description below, just like I have in the past couple months, about where you can go to find out more information about the Anchorage airspace redesign and about how to get yourself signed up for one or both of those virtual meetings that will be held next week, again, September 23rd and 24th. I also want to remind you that your comments are due to the FAA by October 24th. So we got about a month and maybe 5 weeks, 5 weeks total before those comments are due. I've been working on the Airmen's Association comments. I've already made some comments that have been put on the record, apparently, about some of those things already. You will have an opportunity in this virtual informal airspace meetings next week to offer some verbal comments, but I do ask that you follow up those verbal comments with them being submitted in writing. That way you can make sure that your point was accurately captured and ensured that it is put into the federal record. Again, next week, if you're curious to know more about that, that will be the time to ask the FAA directly some questions. I know a lot of you have reached out to me with questions, and I have done my best to help you understand and where to get that information and to answer those questions for you. But I am not the FAA, and I am not the official source. I will say that I am heavily involved in that process just because of the ad hoc committee process, but then also just because it is a major event for us and our membership. And I've made sure that I am up to speed on those things. So do me a favor, study up on it, If you got any questions, reach out to me, but attend those virtual meetings next week, please. Some other things that are on the horizon. I talked about some of these last week, but just to get, or last month, sorry. It seems like it was only a week ago that I was doing this. Time flies. But the Part 108, notice of proposed rulemaking, that is the proposed rule that would basically outline the procedures for drone operations to happen beyond the visual line of sight of the operator. There are a lot of things in this proposal. Over 700 pages are in that proposal. Now, a lot of it is in the appendix, but a lot of things to go through with that. I can tell you that I've been very much involved, and I've got a copy of it here of some industry comments. There has been a large conglomerate of aviation industries, groups and other things that have come together, and we are in the process of releasing our joint comments that we will include each in our individual comments on the things that we all agree on with this proposal. Most of it is things that we want to see the FAA do differently than what they have proposed. And so just to name off a few of the folks that have been working through this process, and now I'm not going to say that they are going to sign on to the final letter because we are still working through the draft, but these are the groups who have been participating in this conversation. And this shows you how important it is when you get this broad of a group together and we are working on things that we all can agree on, that we have concerns about. And so that ought to give you a clue that there's probably some things that you need to be concerned about yourself. But besides the Alaska Airmen's Association, we got the Aircraft Owners and Pilots Association, Vertical Aviation International, the National Air Transport Association, the Experimental Aircraft Association, the National Agricultural Aviation Association, National Business Aviation Association, the Balloon Federation of America, the United States Parachute Association, Airline Pilots Association, National Air Traffic Control Association, Flight Safety Foundation, Pilot Institute, and United Aerial Firefighters Association are the folks who have been coming together and working on a joint issues brief for this proposal. And again, I am not saying that all of those groups are going to sign on to the final document. There's a very good chance that we all will. I can tell you that the latest revision of that document, the Airmen's Association is very happy lending our name to that document. I will make that document available to you after it has been publicly released and finalized with all the signatures of all these organizations that may or may not be participating in that final document. And it will be included with the Airmen's Association comments that will be filed by the October 6th deadline. And I can tell you right now, my notes for our comments are over 12 pages long, and I am going to have to whittle that down because a lot of it is just my notes. But there's a lot of things that we need to be concerned about. Primarily, the things, just so you know, is the change in the right-of-way rules. There's talk in there about what happens when you're inside a certain range of an airport. And do drones have the right of way, or do manned aircraft? The problem we have here in Alaska is that not all landing sites are charted, are they? Most of our landing sites are not charted. So how would a drone operator know that we are actively landing or taking off? That's a concern. The other concern is below 500 feet above the ground, drones would have the right of way over manned aircraft unless you are ADSB equipped. That's what the proposal is. That, to me, sounds like a backdoor ADSB mandate. That's pretty strong language, but that's essentially what's being happening here. There is talk in this proposed rule about a potential technology that could help mitigate some of those things. That would be another method of having right of way over a drone if you're below those altitudes. But that technology has not been approved by the FAA up to this point. And actually, before this rule came out, the FAA was vehemently opposed to that technology operating here in the United States. So I find it rather ironic that now they think it may be a good idea to do that as a potential mitigation. And just in brief and in short, electronic conspicuity is the phrase. That's the name for that technology. It is very similar to what is in Europe and in Australia with FLARM, and that is a portable, battery-powered, anonymous ADS-B-like solution that basically says, this is an aircraft, this is where I am, this is the direction I'm operating in, and this is the altitude and the ground speed that I have right now. It doesn't say anything about the registration of the aircraft. It has no personal identifying information associated with it, and there is no mandate to turn it on or turn it off in Europe or in Australia, but it is a traffic safety enhancement. We have asked for that type of thing here in the United States. The FAA has told us no. They've actually told us 1,000 times no. But now that it could be a possible mitigation to remote operations for drones, the FAA is coming back and reconsidering that, which I appreciate. The problem, however, and I went through this in the previous updates, but again, just to reiterate, the problem is that cannot be a mitigation solution to a rule unless it's already in place. Does that make sense? You can't say we're going to do this, we're going to operate beyond visual line of sight and say there's a chance we may allow this technology, which by the way, we don't have perfected yet. We still have some standards that we haven't decided on. And there are companies out there right now here in the US that have a product sitting on the shelf that they are ready to sell that may actually be the solution to what the FAA is talking about, but they can't sell it because the Federal Communications Commission hasn't signed off on it, and the FAA has not signed off on it. And so for the FAA to come and say, here's a way around this to where you could still have right of way, but yet that solution doesn't exist, I'm going to go as far as to say that's a red herring. That is a distraction from the issue to pull us away from the potential of an ADS-B forced equipage if you want to maintain right of way over an unmanned aircraft or a remotely piloted vehicle or a drone or an unmanned aerial system. All these phrases and terms that still describe the same thing. So that's our two biggest concerns right now. And I, again, am working on our comments on that, which are due to the FAA by October 6th. And I do ask that if you want to know more information about that, again, I'll put the link in the description where you can find that proposed rule. If you do submit written comments, do me a favor, send me a copy of those. I want to know what you're seeing as potential issues, because there might be something I've missed. I don't think so. I spent a lot of time on this, and not just me, but working with other people and other organizations that have been looking at this. So I'm really hoping that we catch all the things. Some other things that are going on, Department of Transportation is looking for information about potential rules and statutes that they could modify when it comes to aviation. And the governor issued basically an executive order. That's not what it's called in state level, but that's essentially the same thing, stating that he wanted to see a reduction in the bureaucracy in the state of 25% by 2027. It's a pretty big reduction. So a 25% reduction in bureaucracy in the state of Alaska by 2027 is the governor's goal. And DOT is looking at Title 17 and things that they can do to help clean that up. Now, originally they had a comment period that ended actually today, but that has been extended to October 17th is now the new deadline for that, because DOT realized 30 days is nowhere near long enough to come up with information about how to streamline Title 17. Now, DOT has also said that they are going to hold some focus groups and some public outreach and engage with the public on this process. So look for more information as that comes around. Just some other quick things. Next week, the 22nd, Monday evening at 5 p.m. at the UAA auditorium there at Merrill Field in Anchorage, Swift Fuels, which is one of the candidate fuel programs for the 100 low-lead replacement fuel, will be in the state, and they are going to have an informational meeting about their candidate fuel 100R and where they are in that process. You may have heard in the media that they got their ASTM standard a few weeks ago. That does not mean they are approved by the FAA at this point. It just is a document that says this is what the product is. So That's a huge step forward, by the way, because one of the candidate fuels out there flat refuses to go through that process. And so that's a little bit of a interesting take, I think, on that process. So again, UAA Auditorium at the Merrill Field Aviation Center, September 22nd, 5 p.m. Information about Swift fuels if you're interested. Also next week, I'm going to be in Anchorage presenting at NASAO, that is the National Association of State Aviation Officials. They're having their annual conference in Anchorage this year, and I've been invited to speak. And I'm going to be talking about Alaska safety initiatives in a panel with some other people about what we're doing here in the state to increase and better our safety record. Great sound of aviation happening over the hangar here in Nenana tonight with moose season well underway. One other thing I am watching, though, pretty closely is there's a potential for another government shutdown here at the end of the month. And what does that look like for the FAA and other things? We've been through this before, kind of know what to expect. Safety critical things are not going to be affected. ATC is still going to operate. All those things are still going to be happening. But does that mean we're on a continuing resolution moving forward? And that's going to be problematic for funding. And there's already projects here in the state that we're relying on federal funding to be completed and have been on hold. And other projects the state has had to front the money to do ahead of time, and the FAA is going to have to pay them back when the FAA gets the budget to do that. Anyway, it's kind of a big mess. So that's one of the other things I'm watching as we move forward. So thank you for watching this month's update. Share it with your friends. Like and subscribe. Do all the things you know you're supposed to do on YouTube. And comment and answer those questions about how do you access charting information in pre-flight and in-flight. And I look forward to hearing your answer. See you next month.